Thank you so much for joining in, everyone. This is our first event of the year. And we're partnering up with LaunchPad. So we have a variety of different faculty speakers today who are just incredible in what they do. And they're here to talk about technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So in our panel today, we have Dr. Abdul Aziz, we have Francisca Reyes, and Dr. William Grover. So let's just give a round of applause for them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll get started with the discussion.
So for the first question, I'll start that off. So tell us about yourself and how you got introduced to innovation and entrepreneurship. So we can start here with Dr. Grover.
Start here? Well, so I'm, let's see, I'm a chemist by training, actually. I'm sort of faking it in the College of Engineering. No one's figured me out yet, so please don't tell anyone. But I was always on the applied side of chemistry. My training in chemistry was my PhD at UC Berkeley in analytical chemistry, where we worked on instruments for the Human Genome Project for sequencing DNA. And so we were engineering, measuring things back then. Did a postdoc at MIT in a lab that worked on sensors for various applications before starting here about 10 years ago. And what was the part of that, how I got introduced to entrepreneurship and innovation? Well, we were chatting about this earlier. A cool thing about at least my trajectory was everywhere I've ever worked, entrepreneurship and technology transfer was kind of part of it was in the water, it was part of the expectation almost. Back in Berkeley, we would help write, the grad students would help write the patent invention disclosures, the little internal document that gets sent to the lawyers to turn into patent applications eventually. And so I was, a grad student when I was first helping write some of those things. At MIT was the same story. And being part of that, I was lucky enough that by the time I started here, I'm on 8 or 9 patents, I think, as an inventor, which is cool. And some of them get enough royalties every year that I can have a nice dinner at McDonald's every year. I wish I was exaggerating, but that's not. But it's been so yeah, that was probably it. I've been exposed to it all along. And so it was sort of implied that part of the fun, actually, part of the excitement of being in academia, being a professor, was the opportunity to not just create knowledge, but also help transfer it out of academia and into the real world where it actually can hopefully make a difference. So that was my exposure.
Well, hello, my name is Francisca Reyes, and my background is wide and very diverse. I actually started in industrial engineering, and then I joined the dark side, and I got my MBA. And then there's when I was doing my master's, when I got invited to do research in entrepreneurship. And that's when I got introduced to that concept. And since then, it's a topic that I've been very passionate about. A friend of mine and I joined another person to create a company, and we failed creating a company about silver nanoparticles, if you know what that is. Anyways, and we failed, but I think in our failure, he taught us a lot of good lessons on how to run a business and start a business. And particularly when we were 3 females, and it was like in a more male-dominated atmosphere. Anyways, and after that, I've done a lot of research on entrepreneurship and helping small businesses and being part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I joined UCR last December as the director for Blackstone LaunchPad. So I enjoy working with entrepreneurs and helping them with their journeys.
Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Leslie Abdul Aziz. I'm a professor in chemical environmental engineering. So similar to Will, I received my degree in chemistry. So my bachelor's degree is in chemistry and my PhD is in chemistry. Ooh. And actually, before I went to graduate school, I worked for 5 years. And half that time was working at a refinery and the other half was working as a forensic chemist. And so those experiences working in those laboratories as a professional chemist actually gave way to my first business idea. So as a forensic chemist in Philadelphia, we had this huge backlog for a lot of drug cases. And we would get very weird, items that would come in that were clearly not drugs. The most weirdest one was urine. And so that was a big problem. We had this huge backlog, and this was costing the city of Philadelphia a lot, costing taxpayers a lot. And so it wasn't until I went to graduate school at University of Illinois, that I decided that I wanted to address that problem, because I still had colleagues that worked either for the city of Philadelphia or for the DEA. Actually, one of my colleagues moved over here is in San Diego, working for a DEA. It still is a prominent issue. And so the idea that I had, and I worked on, I paired up with an engineer, is using old Android phones as a way to make chemical sensors. So we attached a chemical sensor to the phone, interface with the phone, and my partner developed the software that can interface with this chemical sensor. So the idea was that police officers, while they're out on the beat, if they suspect something as being a drug or something else, instead of bringing me or my colleagues' urine, they can test right there. That most likely is not the case. And so that was the idea. And so I built that device, and I really had a lot of fun developing it. I had, in this particular case, a problem in mind to solve. So that was my first introduction in entrepreneurship. I actually did pursue it as a company. It was called Nardo Technology. And everybody thought that Nardo was for like narcotics, but it was because I really like Leonardo da Vinci. Unfortunately, it failed. Failed for reasons that I didn't know, but it was very helpful to explore. So I went into this innovation core program, which is also something here at UCR. And we explored the ecosystem and talked to potential customers about whether they would use our devices. And what we found is that the biggest hurdle was that it's just very difficult to introduce new technologies for law enforcement agencies. And so we just thought that that wasn't a viable company to base it on. Now we could use chemical sensors for something else. Actually, Will, you probably know better than I. But we decided to not pursue that. And that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. And even now as a professor, I am still exploring entrepreneurship for what we're doing now, which is mainly work in sustainability.
Well, thank you. That was great to learn about how you guys kind of got to where you are. The next question is, how do you define innovation? Maybe we can start with Francisca this time.
Okay, well, the theoretical definition of innovation comes from creating new things, but I think and sometimes other people go into, oh, it has to be super novel. And I think it's a little bit of innovation. I think it's just like finding a creative alternative, something that exists out there, or if it's something that you can see an opportunity. And that's how it ties to entrepreneurship. The new or the changing something, and how that creates or sparks an opportunity for you to create a company or to create a new product or a new service.
Dr. Abdul Aziz, do you have anything you'd like to add, anything kind of different?
So I agree with Francis, and I believe for me, innovation is just trying to find a unique way to solve a problem. And, one of the initial problems I introduced with engineers when you talk about innovation is a very simple problem, like with the Brita filter. The inventor of the Brita filter used to drink coffee and tea, and it just had an odd taste to it. And what they wanted to do was just to remove that odor and metallic taste from their morning beverage. And what they did was they created they didn't invent the wheel, they just used activated carbon to purify the water. And then they brewed coffee and tea, and it smelled much better. And now they have a company many decades later that's a household name, which is Brita. So I just think for me, innovation is just a unique way of solving the problem. And it doesn't have to be, extravagant solutions. It was a very simple solution, but something that was today very successful. So.
Dr. Grover, you have
Yeah, I'd just say, I think that's an example of my favorite Steve Jobs quote when he was asked what's innovation and creativity in people, what makes certain people that way. And he answered and said, when you ask people that, real creative, innovative people get kind of embarrassed because they know there's nothing to it. It's just connectivity. It's like you see, you know everything you know, and then you're always exposed to the problems and the challenges, like the lousy coffee. And creativity is just building the bridge between those, right? And I don't know, that resonates a lot with me because, you know, it's encouraging because it means there's not innovation. I don't think comes from a vacuum. It's not like a lightning bolt strikes and you suddenly have this epiphany or whatever. You know, all it is just people that are always learning, you know, they're self-taught or have learned everything they can. So they have all these tools that they can apply whenever they encounter a real world problem, like the coffee situation or the drug analysis story, all of those, you know, they know, oh, I see a connection here, right? That's how Steve Jobs described it. And I totally believe that. So that's how I would try to describe it too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the next question, what effect has innovation made on your fields? And I guess we could start at the other end with Dr. Abdul.
Okay. So my field right now, so I'm no longer doing forensic chemistry. I'm no longer anything resembling an analytical chemist anymore. And I'm actually a chemical engineering professor. But what makes us particularly unique is that we apply chemical engineering to sustainability. So problems with sustainability, what to do with waste. And so in particular, when it comes to innovation in this field, we're really trying to use so for example, what do we do with water bottles? You know, not a very small percentage of it is being recycled. And so you have to try to find innovative ways in which we can utilize those bottles where it doesn't end up in the landfills or it doesn't end up in the environment or ocean turning into microplastics. So what innovations can we do? And that's what we've been working on. And so when I think of innovation in my field, I would say my field is more sustainable engineering, sustainable chemical engineering. I'm a green chemical engineer. I think it's very key because we have to really pin the system, in my case, in how we think of waste. And what we do is we think of waste as a resource. And so, you know, that is really revolutionizing our field right now in terms of, for example, recycling a bottle. So plastic bottles are made out of petroleum. What we're thinking of now is turning it back into petroleum, right? So it's not the greenest thing, but you know, now we're reutilizing that waste plastic as a resource so that it's no longer just standing in the landfills, but now we can maybe use that wastewater bottle into gasoline, for example. So it's very important in the field of sustainability for what I see in the income.
Dr. Grover.
You go.
I'm in bioengineering and which mostly, not exclusively, but mostly focuses on human health and healthcare topics and things. And so it's hard to start into trying to answer this without falling on COVID, you know, and just pointing to what the last few years have brought and the importance of the vaccines that emerged, the rapid diagnostic tests. I teach a medical diagnostics class, and you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I would bring in pregnancy tests to take apart as an example of a lateral flow test. And of course, some people had been exposed to pregnancy tests in their lives, but not everyone had. And so at that point, and so it was an opportunity to take them apart and, oh, that's how that works. How cool. And so I can't do that anymore because everyone has a stack of these on their, you know, right, in their medicine cabinet at home now. And we're all familiar with them. So, but it's a great success story, right? You know, bioengineers that created tools like rapid diagnostic tests and things, right? It means we can, identify when we're sick and isolate and slow the spread of these awful diseases and things. And that's a great thing. So I guess that's one of many examples of innovation in the bioengineering and health sciences that are going on right now.
I guess next. Well, I have my hands in so many pockets. I can tell you about all of this, but for example, one of my fields is economic development. So innovation for economic development is actually making connections in these ecosystems and how we can help people to get into the workforce. And obviously innovations have to do with the acquisition of skills. So that way you have a stronger workforce in our communities, but also how we can help businesses leverage all the resources that they have or use them to their advantage so they can become more productive. But And even here at the university, I consider myself an entrepreneur because I'm like, we use innovations to hopefully teach better, right? And use more other innovative methods for teaching and transfer all the knowledge to you. And also even among ourselves, like how to do this better and give you more access to all the resources that exist out there. And I guess going with entrepreneurship, well, innovation, at least in my case, I try to inspire you to discover all the new things that are happening out there. So hopefully you get excited to explore those new opportunities and decide to become entrepreneurs.
Great, thank you. So the next question, and I'll start with Dr. Grover. How do you actually encourage innovation in your organization or even just generally, if you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my organization, it's the two hats. So there's my research lab and there's the classes and, the students, the 300 upwards of 400 undergrads that are in bioengineering that I feel responsible for. And so I'll try to give you two quickie answers to that. On the undergrad side, a thing I love about the engineering curriculum, and I bet you'll agree, that we didn't have as science majors, is the capstone or the senior design project. We did, I'm sure you and I both did undergrad research, and we had projects, that we were involved in. But in bioengineering, the entire fourth year is dedicated to the senior design process, where they go through the entire process, all the way through from the ideation phase, identifying a problem, doing customer discovery, actually confirming that there's a market for whatever their proposed solution is before they spend time engineering the actual solution. We, as engineers, we like to do that backwards. We love engineering. We'd rather do that first before figuring out there's a market for something. That's bad. So swap them back, figure out there's a market first, then engineer your proposed solution, test it, present it to people. And so it's just so cool to see them do, was it 9 months or whatever of the year, right? They spend on that. And so that's, I hope encourages innovation, because they're basically doing it right in real time. And then in my lab, a lot of the resources like the I-Core inspired programs that the university has offered, they've changed. I don't want to try to say the exact name because sometimes the names have evolved as things have come and gone, but a lot of them share this NSF I-Core curriculum of the lean LaunchPad thing, they call it. I think every grad student I've had here has been involved in one of those programs for their research. And which has been such a gift, right? Because again, it's about not just engineering solutions in the ivory tower and hoping that after we publish a paper, they just magically go off and change the world. It doesn't work that way, right? It behooves us to also be engaged in customer discovery and understanding what the real world needs are that we're trying to solve. And then, the project doesn't just end when you get your PhD, right? You have the opportunity, and some of them have, to see it move forward and actually start a company or actually see it make a difference. So I hope that, both of those sorts of things are examples of how we're encouraging entrepreneurship.
Dr. Reyes?
Oh, okay, it's my turn. Okay, well, as I told you a little bit, I think when you're an entrepreneur, so you're working in the trenches, you're working from within, and you become an agent of change. So when we're trying to do this, at least here myself and at the university, is that try to promote that change in everything that we do. And sometimes we have that challenge. They're saying, oh, we've done this way for such a long time. And I'm like, please, people, there are easier ways to do all these activities or so many of these things. And sometimes we have those barriers, right, that prevents us for changing methods or changing procedures and all those things. But I guess my task or my homework is like, at least try to change a little bit of the mindset of the individuals to say, look, there's easier ways out there that we can incorporate to make our lives easier, or the lives of the students a little bit easier, and reduce the red tape and all the bureaucracies and all those things. But I think sometimes when you are the only entrepreneur, where there's few entrepreneurs, we're like sometimes like working in silos, and sometimes also the task is like have connections and conversations, so that way all of us can work together with the same goal in mind. So,
Dr. Abdul Aziz, do you have any thoughts on how to encourage engagement?
I kind of look at this a little bit differently in terms of I look at through graduate education and what exactly engineers are doing when they go into industry. Or even when they start companies, they're sort of the foundational point for a lot of companies, right? They bring this knowledge base that can translate things out of a chemical laboratory and into an actual product, especially for chemical engineers. And so when I think about graduate education and working with my graduate students, when they first come into the lab, like their first year, I would say they're focused on more dependent thinking. Like maybe somebody gave them a problem, they had to solve it, and it's more of this dependent thinking. And by the goal for me, by the time they graduate, I want them to be independent thinkers and also to be innovative thinkers, because whatever they end up doing, whether it's starting a company or working for a company, I think it's very important to have this sort of innovative, independent aspect that you have, that you can bring to any organization that you work for. And so I really encourage that. So in the first year, I'm very hands-on with my students. And then from the second to the fifth year, I'm very hands-off. I'm like, good luck. I hope you fail. Because you really learn from your failures. And I really do try to encourage them to be more innovative and independent thinkers. And so that's really how I incorporate innovation in terms of like my organization and graduate education students.
Oh, thank you. Next question. What are some surprising experiences you had that have empowered you to become a better innovator? We could start on this one with Dr. Gorman.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Not sure. Who wants to start?
Or-
I can-
You
I can
kick
start.
it off and then I'll
Okay.
ruminate.
So I talked about my first foray into entrepreneurship, which was nanotechnology, turning your phone into a chemical sensor. And I've thought about this idea for years, and I finally had a way to actually bring this product into fruition. And now it was to see whether this actual idea for a company was viable. And after our experiences talking in this ecosystem, talking with potential customers and so forth, to come to the realization that it was a failure. And so after that, for me, I was really down in the dumps because I really fell in love with that idea. I was hoping that it would be something that will work. And so, you know, I think there's this graphic where you like sort of this entrepreneurship, you're down in trenches and then like there's like a hill, but the hill has like a lot of dips. I was like all the way down here. But surprisingly now, even when we're exploring entrepreneurship and sustainability, now I wouldn't say I have a full attachment to my ideas, but now I'm now with going through that experience, I think it has made me a better person who thinks about innovation, because now I'm thinking about the ecosystem, right? Before I totally fall in love with this idea, I'm thinking, okay, whether this will be a viable business concept now as I'm moving forward. So surprisingly, this failure that I was so down in the slumps about for a while, because I really fell in love with that idea for years. I thought it was a good problem. I experienced it. I was the one who got the urine. And to now see that, okay, it might be a good idea, but it's not going to be a profitable idea. Now that's really changed my outlook. And when I think of like potential business ideas, which translate things that we do in the laboratory and take them out of the laboratory. So, yeah.
Hi, it's my turn. I think in my case, getting the opportunity to work with other people with different backgrounds in different perspectives gives you the opportunity of seeing other possibilities that sometimes you just ignore, because sometimes you're like, oh, that's the dumbest idea. But sometimes getting to know other people that convince you just to give it a try. I think that was a good thing for me. And also give yourself the opportunity to fail. because like you, when I failed, I was completely devastated because I was like, how is it possible? I'm an MBA. I'm supposed to know all these things. How is it that I'm failing on this? But once you get the opportunity of failing, and it goes with the lean launchpad thing, and I never understood that fail fast until that happened to me. I was like,
sure.
oh, okay, failing fast means that I have permission to fail, but I don't have permission to stay there at the bottom. I need to bounce back. And I think that's when I understood it. And I was like, okay, I can fail, but I just need one day just to recharge and then try something else. And with renovated energy and intentions of coming up with something new.
Yeah. What you just said, I mean, isn't that a message and a lesson, not just for entrepreneurs, but everybody in life and how they relate to failure and react to it, just as a thought. But my surprising thing, I think that comes to mind is, as part of the university's proof of concept grant and mentorship program, I got paired up with one of the entrepreneurs in residence that the university has, Steve Sharp, who's been wonderful, just the greatest guy to work with and a really, really great friend now. And with his help, we did customer interviews and did about 50 of them, I think. And what surprised me about that experience was I was blown away by how giving people are with their time when you do that customer discovery interview process. Because going into that, I thought, gosh, what people are going to be yelling at us. No one wants to spend 30 minutes talking to some random dudes from, from Riverside that are just found them on LinkedIn and call them up. And no, it was the opposite of that. Generally, people are so gracious and giving of their time. We were talking with people who are experts, some of the leaders in their fields, and they had time for little old me, which was mind-blowing. And we learned so much from that process, so much. And I, in every way, not just about the business idea we were pursuing, but just about life and about other research topics that my lab is now dealing with, and so much. So that was really surprising, and a really happy surprise that people are generally very giving of their time. And that was nice. So
Great, thank you for all those great answers. The next question is COVID-19 related. COVID-19 has impacted all of us. How has it impacted you in your work? And we can start with Dr. Grover.
I keep trying to pass this part of that. I mean, I already alluded to the importance of biomedical engineering for, in a pandemic. And so there's that. I've already said that. I guess I'll just answer the question, how has it personally impacted my career and my life? It's been hard. And I have a lot of support networks in place that a lot of people don't have, but I have kids, but they're older. I think about, what if this had happened when they were very young and required so much more attention? Or what if I didn't have my wife and the rest of, my family as a support mechanism for this? And so I don't know. It's been hard on everybody. I won't always try to find a silver lining in everything. I wish it hadn't happened. I guess, obviously that goes without saying, but it's, I'm glad that, I'm not sure what else to say about it. It's been challenging. I feel like I've been part of a community that's helped me out, and I wouldn't have made it without that, I guess is what I would say.
Dr. Abdul Aziz.
So I would agree. Unfortunately, during COVID-19, I was one of the ones as a young child. Yeah. My daughter had just turned 2 years old, and my spouse was still going into work. But I was the stay-at-home mother who also had to juggle being a professor. Yeah. And that was thrusted on me, quickly. And so that was particularly challenging. But I think in the long run, what I'm seeing coming out of the pandemic and coming out of COVID-19 is that my team, like the research group and I, were really trying to work effectively at home. Now I can work effectively at home while listening to Sesame Street and singing in the background. Now I could do that very effectively. Or my team, I know when they're not working in the laboratory, they may be reading some research papers. They're not exactly in the office doing that. They're probably at home doing that. So I think in the long run, I think with our time management and ability to focus, I think that has improved. But as far as like impacted me, yeah, it was really tough. Yeah.
Dr. Reyes, I know you started during the pandemic.
Yes.
So how was
I
that?
started during COVID. I joined UCR in December last year. So yes, I still don't know a lot of people here at the university because of that. But COVID happened to me in another organization in another country. I was actually in Mexico working with the United Nations Development Program. And I loved Zoom at the beginning because it's like, yes, I can be in my jammies working on this, but that got old. I don't want to be in Zoom anymore. But going to business and economic development and all the things that I'm doing, I could see that it affected all of us at different levels. And obviously, what you mentioned, Leslie, resonates a lot on uneven disparities or even in the roles. Like, how come some of us have to do so many things, right? Like being at home and doing taking care of some people, while others are more independent, and even for businesses, I was actually helping the UN with value chains and all of these things. It's like all these challenges of producing things and bringing them to people on time, and all the crises that we had for supplying so many things, going with paper roll, like and toilet paper and so many crazy things. Anyway, but those effects still remain. But at least for me, with helping small businesses, the struggle was also how change methods. And you saw it, like, okay, companies that they didn't have a website, or you couldn't order from them online, right? Or now that going with innovations, we start relying on Uber Eats or DoorDash or so many other things. For me, witnessing all that, the struggles for the small business to adapt to this new area, right? And also, but they also the struggles of the rest of the value chain. It was quite interesting. And I was watching all that in my dummies in my apartment. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, next question should be a pretty easy one. It's just what motivates and inspires you. And maybe we could start at the other end with Dr. Abdul Aziz and then work our way down towards me, I guess.
I think, so right now we're really interested in sustainable entrepreneurship, mainly because, so I'll take an example. Let's say that we want to use greenhouse gases instead of petrochemical fuels, petroleum. Well, that's something really difficult that a large corporation can do. In fact, talking with like Chevron and all of these large conglomerates, that's something that they would not even look at. But with startups, you can be very innovative with your ideas. You can have sort of this idea like, oh, I'm turning air into plastics, or I'm turning air into a source of fuel. And I think that really motivates me. The idea that sustainable entrepreneurship can bring about sort of this ideal society where we're not generating a lot of waste, and we're utilizing this waste as a resource. And because of that, our environment is better. Our environmental health is better. Our health is better. Mammalian health is better, oceanic as well. I think just looking at that idealistic endpoint for sustainable entrepreneurship is what truly motivates me. Yeah.
I know it's gonna sound super cheesy, but what inspires me and motivates me is sometimes when I see you guys coming out with your ideas and see you grow on it, because I'm like, oh, look at them. It's like, oh, and sometimes I'm like, oh, your baby is so ugly. Why? Why
no.
are you so little? And I'm like, your idea is so ugly. But, but then sometimes I'm like, it's not my job. My job is not to tell you your baby is ugly. But my baby is just to help you give it a makeover so it gets better. And that sometimes is that brings me here. And I'm like, okay, let's work on this a little bit more.
I'm worried about how ugly my babies are. There you go. Yeah, but that's what you said really, because it's, yeah, I mean, I think I get depressed over the summer because I miss teaching, honestly, which is weird. You've had me in classes and things, and I get this huge endorphin, whatever hit out of just what you said, you know, being in that classroom, seeing the next generation. I also get over the summer and at times a little depressed about the future and various things going on that are out of my control and are kind of sad. And that goes, you know, my catharsis and my therapy is the classroom and office hours and getting to talk with students, my grad students and my undergrads, and seeing how brilliant they are and how like, oh yeah, it'll be okay, right? We've got them going out there facing these really awful, massive problems that need fixing like yesterday. Cool, you know, so that's, I feel like a lot of my job is just being a pep rally, you know, leader and encouraging you all to do that, because it's, you know, it's we need you, you know, and so, yeah, that's my motivation.
So our last question, and we'll start with Dr. Reyes in the middle. Can you give us an example of some resources on or off campus that you've used in your research or your innovation?
Well, yes, I can tell you a lot of that because my job is try to curate all those resources for you guys. So that way you can go and explore them, check them out. But I guess it's my time to make commercial and tell everybody, go downstairs to room 140 to the creative lab, and you can have the perfect environment to explore your ideas. They have a little equipment, and you can have it's a safe environment, so you can just play with all those things and explore your ideas. Nobody judges you, I hope. But also Blackstone Launchpad is a resource for you guys because we give you funding and other support to explore your ideas and continue your entrepreneurial journey. And even on that, I try to be active in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I get familiarized with all the resources that exist at the university and also in the region, like what's out there to benefit entrepreneurs.
Dr. Abdul Aziz, any resources on and off campus that you use?
Yeah, so as a professor, I've recently used Innovar, which was last fall, and that was really helpful. We had a team of 4 PhD students and myself. I just was along for the ride. And they meant to interview at least over 60 customers, potential customers. And so the Innovar is basically similar to the NSF I-Core program, and that was really beneficial for us because unlike my idea in graduate school, this idea seems to be valuable, which is basically turning a waste resource, California waste resource, into a water filter. And so that's something that we're pursuing. In one form or another, in a different campus, when I was a student, I utilized resources very similar to these. So for like the Creator Lab, when we developed these sensors, and it was just an idea, but we just wanted to have something to present to people. Like, for example, in practice pitches, we would use a 3D printer. So that's, I know, something that's in the Creator Lab, right? And then something with LaunchPad, which was really helpful being a student who was really interested in entrepreneurship. I found like being an entrepreneurial graduate student was like somebody who believed in aliens. Like people would look at me weirdly, because they were like, what? And so like going to something similar to LaunchPad, I really equivalent to it at University of Illinois, it was really nice to be around other entrepreneurs because you drew off of that energy. And so, you know, like here at Riverside, I've used Innovar, but at other campuses, I've used resources very similar to what's provided here. It's been really beneficial.
Dr. Grover, any resources that you use on off campus?
Yeah, some similar experiences. I've been through the NSF I-Core, you know, patterned curriculum that's now Innovar, I believe. I think when I went through it, it was before, it was a previous incarnation of it, but I've been through that. I can't count how many times with different projects. And it was always valuable every time. Some of those were just the 3-week, you know, condensed experience, but even that was so valuable. And so I mean, I highly recommend those sort of experiences because it was a short, brief, intense opportunity to explore an idea and see if it has legs, you know, And if it doesn't, fail early and move on to your next idea. And if it does, then there's this whole ecosystem that the university, and all these different folks have built, that provide funding, provide mentorship. Funding's nice, mentorship is priceless. I love Steve so much. Steve, he's wonderful. I wish we could clone Steve and have one of him in every lab and every class. So yeah, just there's so many good resources available. And then back to like the undergrad experience too. I did undergrad research. I love having undergrads doing research in my lab. And so this is sort of related to this. It's really a wonderful way to expose yourself to that, to the research enterprise, which is where I guess a lot of entrepreneurship and things start, is by getting involved in research labs. And so that, I think folks that have entrepreneurial ambitions might get good experiences from just getting involved in whatever professors, research going on. That's usually a valuable experience too. But it's just the ecosystem here over the 10 years I've been here has grown so great for everybody, for students, for faculty. It's just take advantage of those opportunities if you're interested in them.
Great. So now we're gonna open it up to any questions. So whether it's on Zoom or in person, if you have anything you want to ask, now's the time. And if you don't, is there anything the panel would like to add, or any advice, maybe for undergrad or graduate students who are looking to innovate or kind of have an entrepreneurial spirit?
Let's do it. Yes.
Face some sort of slump after your project failed, and I just want to know how you built yourself up to get back there and trust your ideas again, and trust yourself into coming up with an ambitious idea again and ask you to pursue it again.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because it took me a while. But I think after that experience, I was like, okay, this was beneficial. Because thinking in the long run, I'm not running a company that's going to lead me or red for local government that pay us. And so I think what happened for me is I finally had this realization, like, okay, I understand why it failed. And then with that understanding, I then was able to sort of start again into generating ideas. It did take me a while before I wanted to go back into entrepreneurship, because I really love that idea. But after that, I just grew confident. And like I said before, now I understand with idea generation to also understand the ecosystem at the same time, whether this would be a viable idea or not. So to me, it was a learning experience, but it took some time.
More questions.
Yeah, I think some interviews, but
Good.
the way I got into was the neurosurgery field.
Wow.
Got into complex care. We got all these different types of complications, physical and mental.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, how well do you have to do complex complication control prior to like, let's say, filing a patent, or when do you decide that this device is good enough to at least go and get file patent or be established or ready for manufacturing to some degree? Like how many complications at least you have to take into consideration before you can take the first step?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. I mean, some of the specific advice would be specific, I need to know more about what particular complications and things you're considering, that are limiting, but you think might be. But, with patents, for better or worse, with the shift to first to file kind of, and that emphasis, it's probably never too early to pursue that. That have more experience with this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably true. So it's good to, and then, patents, it's never, sometimes we look, it's a patent. Well, it's never a patent. It's a family, right? You start and get that priority date and things, all situated, but then there's going to be all these little additions to it and additional whatevers that, make the the lawyer's wealthy over time. So, so yeah, so is that, I don't know, it's sort of doing all of them at the same time. It's not a very satisfactory answer, but
I was thinking maybe something like for clinical trials, using several circle.
yeah.
FDA level, because we, high risk of things like how well do you have to control first?
Well, answering questions like that could be the basis for funding, for applying for a SBIR or similar, kind of funding. So, yeah, I mean, so, so you're asking, maybe it's a valid question, but you can turn that around to be an advantage where you're actually going out and finding non-dilutive, funding that can support the early days of the company while you answer important questions like that. Is that maybe an answer? So, what do y'all think?
No, yeah, I agree that, I mean, when you're still dealing with these complications, first protect your idea, and with a provisionary patent will be the best way. And then look for, when we're talking about non-dilutive funding, it's like, okay, the company is still yours, like the pie is still yours. You haven't shared any piece of the pie with anybody. And when we're talking about SBIR, it's a grant from, the federal agency that's supporting you to go and develop your idea a little bit further. So you already went through customer discovery. So you already went a little bit with that, for whom we're doing this and what is the value that your invention is bringing to the world. So that helps you to develop this a little bit, getting more funding to inject it, make it more solid, a better baby, better looking baby. And then that way you can still doing the other stages. And because it's life sciences, it's more complicated because you have these more stages. Before you get to clinical trials, you have to do probably a lot of things and pass so many hurdles. So, but it's just talk to us. Venkat is right there. Venkat actually works with the Office of Technology Partnerships, and you have a big support group here at the university. All of us can help you one way or the other to continue on your journey.
I'll be helping with cosmetic surgery.
You never know. We had the lady in the back, and then we can go back to you. Yes.
Consumers.
Could you clarify your question a little bit more?
It is mostly more on the chemistry side of pharmaceuticals. I guess, how do you avoid something like this situation when need it?
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the challenge, and that's why business get a really bad rap. Samples like the insulin, because like seriously, people, this is a need, and you're gonna charge me $100 or something for like, well, no, that was the case for the EpiPen, right? Or something like that. That was like brutal. But the point is that most of the businesses, we need to consider the customer first and the need of the customer because without the customer, we don't have a business. And obviously, sometimes we go further and say, no, it's a paying customer. But you're like, but you need to understand first what's going great. Hopefully I understand it. Like what's the real problem or the real need of the customer and work on it around that. Not necessarily, oh, I want to get into this to become rich. Because all of us have that social responsibility of helping others, even though sometimes business forget about that. But at least in our case and Innovar and all that, I mean, it's customer oriented all the time. It's like we try to come up with a business model or a way of doing this completely oriented on or focusing on the customer. I hope that helps. Not sure. Anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still sustainable to have a model like that?
I don't think so, but I think your generation has different opinions about that. And even in business, all of us will vote with our feet. And when I say that, it's because if you don't like something, you can kill it, right? You can kill it, give a bad review on Instagram. You can kill it, no buying from them. And you guys have, all of us as customers, we have a little power on businesses with the purchasing decisions that we make every day, right? Because you're like, I'm not gonna buy that. Or even you guys are more conscious of all of those things because you do a little more research on companies than my generation. I didn't care what Exxon was doing. I was like, whatever, you guys are cool. But you guys are a little more sophisticated in that regard because you start exploring what the companies are doing to help you and helping, like in sustainability efforts. So I think because of that, the good companies are more aware of that and they're trying to be more proactive on changing their practices. And I don't think we're longer going to stay on the pure capitalism systems for a long time. If you don't mind, the lady that was, okay, please.
Building off of our question, like just off the top of your head, do you have any like ideas like some kind of protected patents, for example? Say, for example, you made a patent on a type of insulin, you can file a specific type of patent so that it doesn't allow people to monopolize the idea or something along that line?
The problem with this, and going back to the EpiPen challenge, is that patents have a shelf life. So they just protect you for a period of time. And after the patent expires, it's free, like for everybody else. And that's the, I'm not sure if you can create a new patent for insulin because unless you come up with a new method for processing it, but that is the reason why, we got into these changes and all the challenges for pricing as well. Because a company can, once you lose the patent, there's no rights for, setting the price or, taking control of the market. And then since there's no control anymore, because you can decide the pricing structure that the companies go and when they increase the prices. I'm not sure if there's a way to have a new insulin.
Well, imagine like a patented production method that's, better, more efficient, whatever, or this or that, or.
To reduce the cost.
Yeah.
Make it more affordable.
What came to mind for both of those last questions was like a field like the fake meat industry, the Beyond Burgers and all these different things. And I'm not sure, I'm not an expert of the history of the development of that, but I think that emerged not because there was a moral, need to develop it. There was, but rather because there was a market. It was capitalism still. I'm not claiming capitalism is the answer. It's not, often, but that, none of that would have existed if there weren't people, entrepreneurs who thought there was probably money to be made in developing a hamburger that, satisfies all these demands. And so it just strikes me there's similar, that's an example maybe where societally driven demands influence the capitalist machine. The outcome is a good outcome. We have, ways of getting food that don't require animals. How did it come about? Maybe still capitalism. I'm not sure what that, I'm trying to say with that example, but maybe there's something instructive there. The challenge is how do you apply that lesson to insulin or something? But I don't know. Mind control.
Not a complete history, but for fake meat industry. It started from smaller people who wanted to make something but had no direction on it.
Yeah.
One of the fake meat like burger sort of situations were funded somewhere at a very small VC in San Francisco quite a while back. Once they made their pilot in a way, but they invited real meat burger eaters to check out the product that they made and basically said that try this tastes like that.
Yeah.
Okay, the one that you've been having. once I passed that stage, then the traction started coming, but before that, only the tiny VC was running out.
Yeah.
Took a while. But yeah.
Mm.
So you mentioned working with undergraduate students with their capstone projects. And as you might know, you're encouraged to explore outside of our field. So I'm a psychology major, and I obviously all I know is psychology, but that's all I've been taking. And I was exploring bioengineering and chemistry and neuroscience, just things that I was not very familiar with. But then when I did some research, I realized that so much jargon and so many concepts that I have no way of knowing. And I guess what I'm asking is that how do you tear through all that fog to get a general idea, but also like a solid understanding of a pretty complicated concept to just putting your foot through the door into a new field like bioengineering?
Oh, yeah. Great question. I think if a field that you're not trained in is so impenetrable that someone with a psychology background, though, right? I mean, that's a rigorous training. You should be, we should be, the burden's on us. We should be communicating better is the way I react to that, right? If I'm writing a paper that you as a psychology major, can't, grasp what's going on with it, I failed, not you. If that makes sense, So there's a bigger problem there, but yeah,
Just to relieve the stress for me, to be honest, like you as professionals, you're mostly writing for people that are in your field.
yeah,
But
that if you lean to, this is sort of an axe, this is a digression, it kind of bugs me, but yeah, I don't know, that's a crutch, I tell my students not to use abbreviations, and everything, because, right, if it's not DNA or something, not everybody knows it. And so it's just another little barrier. So I don't know. I think we can write for an educated high school audience and still tell a compelling story, right? But anyway, take advantage of where you are. The great thing about a large public university is there's just so much going on. And so my finger on the pulse of other stuff going on here is not the direct scientific literature, but things like the news office, the news.ucr.edu kind of website. I love watching the feed of everything going on there. I've met people through that. I've learned about people I didn't even know, but they have a research interest that resonates with my interest. And I'll email them and be like, wow, I saw that cool press release y'all did. And so that's low hanging fruit. If you just want to widen your area of expertise and the inputs going into you and learn what all's going on campus, the press release kind of stuff going on is a good source for that. And again, back to my point about being surprised at how open people were with their time. You find someone, a particular person whose research interests you and you wanted to get more immersed in it, email the person and ask to take them out for coffee or something, right? Sometime worst response, they'll ignore you or they'll say they're too busy or whatever. But 5 minutes with an expert is worth hours of you poring over the literature, trying to understand, you know what I mean? Something. And then finally, you mentioned in bioengineering, and bioengineering, for better or worse, is such a broad field. It's kind of our curse. We're jacks of all trades and masters of some, but so be specific. I'm sure if I asked you, there are specific, areas within whatever outside of psychology that you have in mind when you ask that question. And so, yeah, reach out to people, find the handful of people on campus or whatever that are experts in that, and get on their radar and start asking questions. And they could recommend books. There's such good literature, the popular science books on any topic, right? My field's in microfluidics, and a friend of mine at University of Washington wrote a book on microfluidics. It's written for a lay audience. You would be, it's way overqualified to read it, but you might find it interesting. So now if someone like you approached me about that particular technology, microfluidics, I have a book I can hand them that tells the history of that and why it's cool, and every field has a book like that, or if it doesn't, someone should write it. And so you see what I mean? The answers are out there. Don't ever feel like you're just beating your head against the library alone. You're not. Go, ask for help and you'll find it.
And just a follow-up question. Do you think it's a realistic goal to have I want to generate an innovative idea in a field that I pretty much very, very beginner level at, because the more you know about a subject, the more immersed you are in the details of it. And so the idea that you're thinking about is realistic in a way because you know the logistics behind how it might work, how it might not work. And so is realistic to have that.
I don't know, I think it is.
I think it is.
There's many examples of successful business ideas of people who are not exactly in that business or have that area of expertise. So Airbnb is an example. I mean, those founders are just an example of people who are just trying to find a valuable business idea because they were just, before they had the idea of Airbnb, I think they were selling like Obama-O's cereals or something
Really?
like that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Now they have the software that connects people so that you can stay at other people's houses. Maybe they're experts at staying at other people's houses, but they made a viable idea. You know, if you think about like Uber or Lyft, these wasn't like cab drivers who thought of these ideas. These were some computer scientists that were like, I want to make this software for you know, to try to pin the transportation system, and they did that, and they did this from the outside. So I think it's perfectly fine if you're thinking about a cool idea outside of the field.
I think that being said, if it's really outside of your area of expertise, get a mentor who has some expertise in that, because the worst thing would be for you to reinvent the wheel and not realize it, or worse yet, invent a square wheel, you know, right, that someone, you know, invented a while back. And so, yeah, right. So again, 30 minutes with an expert could give you that little sanity litmus test to be like, okay, you know, are there legs on this? Yes or not? You know?
So I'm there. I don't know if it's a good question, but I just have to ask you this. So we all talked about like failures and successes. So I myself had like multiple projects that I'm currently working on and many failures. And one of the things that I noticed that I had a very big weakness in, and if I improved it, it would save so much resources and so much energy and so much time for me, was to like when you have a project, how do you know it's time to accept that it's going to be a failure rather than staying on it and keep moving forward? For example, with your project, like you said law enforcement is very hard, but I would have been like, oh, but there's another way to do this, and I would waste time. So like in your current examples, like what was the point that you realized, okay, like, failure and I can move forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because I was like that, you know. So when I first mentioned the idea where I wanted to create a chemical sensor for law enforcement agencies, I did have a mentor through a program like LaunchPad, but at the University of Illinois. And my mentor hated it and gave me so many reasons why they hated it. Yeah, you know, I just need to go through that whole experience with the NSFI Corps, where it wasn't just somebody's opinion. It was more like, okay, this is quantitative data now, which is more convincing for how my brain works.
Yeah.
Like if I'm seeing all these people say no or maybe, then that's more convincing to me than somebody's opinion. And so that was more convincing to me, and that my idea was a failure. Yeah.
That's it. I like that. That's the right answer. One person can say anything to you advice wise, but if you're hearing the same thing time and time again, in the customer discovery process with Steve, we started categorizing the responses, because you would hear the same thing time and time again. You know, after you do tens and tens of these. I love the data analogy, and you know, so yeah, if you're science minded and you appreciate data, then you can create a spreadsheet and summarize all of these responses. And if you see that 80% of people are saying that there's flaws with your idea, that's probably right. The value of the data. So
I'll say it. You're in love with your baby, and sometimes when your baby is ugly, but but the point is, and I'm getting to you get enamored with your baby, and sometimes you stop listening to people because you're actually so in love with the baby. Even if the baby is ugly. But actually listening to everybody else. I mean, sometimes, and that's the value of customer discovery interviews, because it forces you to be actively listening to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And not, you're like, but my baby, it's my baby and I love it, it's so cute. No, you need to actually listen to what the customers, the customers of existing products or services are telling you about the things that existing products or services are doing for them.
Yeah.
And you can think of like how you could solve that problem or, solve the deficiencies of all these existing products or services, but you need to listen. And when you transfer it from listening to an insight and saying, okay, so I interview 80 people and this is what they told me, it becomes this, data now. Now it's your time to face the reality and say, my baby,
Yeah.
it's good or no anymore. But it's also a reflection exercise.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't get there early. Going again with that is the phrase failing fast encompasses all that.
Yeah.
Like do it fast enough so you're not tired or demotivated, that you're still having some energy to move on to the next phase.
Can I add to it? We're not doing customer discovery as a judgment call on how effective the baby is. You're doing customer discovery to learn about the customer and their needs. And so, right, if you've been through any of this curriculum, you know this. So just on the chance that this is of use to anyone, right? You don't begin the interview by saying, "Here's what I've created. Do you need this?" Right? That's wrong. It's the worst way to start, I think, because you're polluting their untouched opinions, right? I want to know first off, what are their pain points in general, right? In their day-to-day life, right? And if you approach it like that, every interview isn't a judgment call on your baby. Rather, every interview is an opportunity to learn, and you might discover the next really pretty baby in the process. So we really ruined the metaphor here, but you keep on going. And so I think that's important. That's the advice I always give people doing this customer discovery, is that every interview it's not a judgment of you and what you're doing. Your invention may not even come up in that interview because you might go in a different direction that's so valuable to you and you learn so much from it that it's okay, right? If there's a natural place later on in the interview to bring up what you've been working on and get specific feedback, that's good too. But we don't lead with that. We're there to learn in general, and it's not a positive or negative thing. It's just learning. It's just information for you. So is that good? So.
Totally.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yes, and one time questions for Dr. Reyes. So you said that you were offered opportunity in research for internship,
Entrepreneurs. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what were some of the topics that you're interested in researching once you were offered the opportunity?
Well, in terms of research, so there are several things that you can do actually. You can participate with other faculty or any other people to help them with the customer discovery process. Right now, for example, there are some students that are interns that are helping groups to help them to do those customer discovery interviews and all those things, because sometimes they require a lot of time, like doing all the scheduling, all that. But even on that, you can, and even making connections with other students, they're working on their other, startups, and you can become part of those teams. And in my case, for example, we offer funding. So, in terms of, and Ankita is here. Ankita has been introduced herself, but the support that you get from LaunchPad, it's also more towards competitions or even giving you more resources for developing your entrepreneurial ideas, but also putting you in contact with mentors and another organizations that can help you, get more funding. But also off the top of my head, like we support research, more research in terms of this, your idea or developing your idea, and not necessarily research for, let's say, your thesis or anything of that nature. Sure.
So I have a question for myself. I am an undergrad, so I did my undergrad and graduation back in India. In biotechnology, so I'm kind of related to what you're doing.
Cool.
But then I came here as a finance student. I was connected to some e-cells back in my country. So my goal is to kind of do what you're doing. So I want to help people who are in the process of making ideas and problem help on finance,
Okay.
right? So I'm
Inventors need a lot of finance help.
Oh, yeah, gosh, yes.
Yes, because and that's actually a good opportunity for all of you to explore as well, because sometimes we have a disconnect between any other field and business, because when you're like, oh, you need to write a grant, and you're like, yeah, we can do that and explain your technology at length, right? You can write a lot about this, but when it comes to numbers, or like, what is your market size, or what is your business potential, or how much, or even pricing structures and all those things, sometimes it's difficult for people to make that connection on that. Or even when you go to other stations and say, oh, you need to present this in front of a venture capitalist, and you're like, it's like Shark Tank, but actually these sharks are vicious, because they can just ask you very difficult questions, and you need to be super prepared on those ones. But translating that, even the descriptions of technologies into a more business oriented, or removing the technology concepts and put it just in regular layman's terms, it's actually actually a thing that not a lot of people know how to do, and there's a lot of business that require a lot of support and services in that regard.
How do I get up into that sort of career path?
How do you get into that career? Well, you can, in the school business, and pretty much every single school of business, they give you opportunities to get familiarized with writing, let's say, business plans or business model canvases, and being familiarized with all those concepts, like, oh, what is an elevator pitch and all that. But then you just need to approach other organizations or other departments, and sometimes it's, for example, the Office of Technology Partnership. We try to become that bridge between technology and business and help with all those things. That's why he was nodding, because he knows that it's challenging sometimes doing those things without business knowledge. The good thing here is that, like in Innovar, you guys were exposed and had the opportunity to interact with MBA students or with students from school business that were, getting that experience. So that's the first step, getting that experience in college, and then later on you can continue doing that. You can become part of, let's say, any organization that provides technical assistance for like the Small Business Development Center, or continuing the technology transfer office of any institution. Or later on, you can become your consultant, but later, or just get together with Steve Sharp or any other mentors, so that way you get a little more familiarized with the business concepts, and more familiarized interacting with startups or with entrepreneurs. It takes a little bit of that. Formally, yes, you need to get trained, but you can get certified to become an SBDC technical expert and all that. That's another path. It requires a little bit like taking a few classes. It's not like as intense of taking like the CPA exam and become certified, but there's a path to become certified for technical assistance, for business technical assistance.
Well, it's almost 4.
Yeah.
How the room
Any other
go?
questions?
Sure. So my team members and I have been working on a whole pitching process where we have the idea of have all of the planning in place. But we faced numerous rejections, and a lot of these objections aren't from the customers who interviewed. They're from another, bureaucracy, for instance, that is overseeing what our customers are doing. And we're trying to get into this bureaucratic little circle, and we're trying to get our way through it, but it's been rejection after rejection. And actually, today I have a call after this panel with one of those main stakeholders, and I'm just wondering what are your tips for people who are in this position where they think their baby, their idea is all good, and there are, of course, a couple ways where we can pivot later on, but what do we do with this position?
In your case, it's because the decision maker is the one that is rejecting your product, right? Or your product or say,
Yeah.
and it's because of some bureaucracy that exists right there, right? Some barrier, either budgetary barrier or avoiding change, implementing
Yeah, I'll
something
just be
new.
more specific, sorry. I'm not too generic.
No, but what you're saying is like the decision maker is the one that is supposed to, and not the other parties.
Yeah, so we're trying to implement after school program, and it's a way to support AP students, honor students, and other high-priority classes instead.
Mhm.
And we have all the teacher support, because this is actually geared for the teachers and the students to empower both of those stakeholders, since we've seen what it's been doing to the teachers with the high rates of them just quitting, and the students are suffering as well. The students, the teachers are on board with the district. The district has been a tough barrier of entry, and we've had numerous calls where they say, we love this program, we're going to implement it. And then later down the road, we get an email saying that they don't want to implement the program. We're trying to figure out why, so that's actually the meeting that I have next. And what are your thoughts on how we should navigate this process? I know it's a loaded question, so I'm sorry about.
Oh, that's interesting. And so the decision person, the person with the decision to make is the district. It's not on the teachers. This isn't the kind of thing that a teacher could on their own volition implement in the classroom. It has to be at the district level.
Yeah,
And what do they say when they say no to the idea?
it was an interesting thing. So they didn't actually respond to that email. So I have had numerous other calls with district people saying that since you are a student, and this is an interesting situation, you don't have that PhD and you're working with other graduate students in school education, you have a faculty advisor in the school education.
Yeah.
But you won't be going forward with it. And I've heard from mentors that they think it's because we're all students that are developing this program. So we can't just change that. We can't turn into practice. So we're not sure if that's the main reason.
That's a reasonable,
Yeah.
I can see even from various legal and regulatory and issues, a district being
Yeah.
skittish about letting quote, students in. So
Yeah.
then what do you need? How can you get your team, have someone on it with like the faculty or someone with the degree and some credentials?
Yeah.
That is what comes to mind, right? So that you're showing a team that's more than just students, maybe.
Absolutely. We have the graduate students for
Yeah, but
go into the support everyone. We're all here. We have faculty advisors from the school education.
yeah,
So it's that interesting situation where you think everything works, but then it doesn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Other targets like beyond the districts, like what about charter schools and things that have a little more autonomy to them? Could you reach out to them and see if they give you a different response?
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Definitely look into that.
Um,
Yeah.
Private schools, there's just, I guess I'm saying there's other,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll add to that, but maybe if you can find somebody that is, I don't know, in an external party that it might have some influence on that, I don't
yeah.
know. A parent that is part of the PTA or those people that are really involved in the educational system. Besides teachers, but I mean, an external person say, just give them a
Right.
chance.
So I think within districts, like large districts like RUSD and PSUSD and things that I've dealt with a little bit, they have science coordinator people who are, not teachers per se, but they're at the district level, but they help coordinate that curriculum throughout all the schools. If you could get, because, and this was a STEM story, right? These were, so right, if you could get in, I know one of them at Palm Springs Unified. If you could get in their good graces, then you have someone on the inside that's vouching for you, even though even if you're, you know what I mean? So that could be a way.
I think one of our other students was saying this in the audience where, you are from a different field. I'm not an education major, I'm computer science and business. So I do see that there is some trouble there, but I completely agree, finding a champion in our work can help move things forward. So sorry, I asked such a loaded question.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a dilemma. Cool.
I think that wraps up our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For having us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It was fun.
that was fun.
You empower us, you motivate us, you inspire us. So we have balls. We really, really thank you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coming. Yeah.